Hamilton, Chair of our Fitchburg Bike Committee. I am going to call the June 6, 2023 meeting of the Bike Committee to order. And the first order of business is going to be approve the draft minutes of April 4th to 2023. Those were sent out with from Phil last week. So are there any comments from the group about the minutes?
This is Andy. I'd make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kelly. Is there any other discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in approval of the minutes signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Okay, the minutes are approved. The next thing, Scott, we have nobody in the meeting room, but there anybody who wants to make a public appearance for non-agenda items? No, sir, there isn't. Okay, thank you very much. Moving along to item 4, new committee introductions. We will start by, first of all, ask each of you who are new to the committee. We have one new member who was at our last meeting who's out of town, and her name is Dawn Krim. But everybody else on the committee now is here. So I will start over to my right, and Kelly, if you'll tell us a little bit about yourself, your interest in cycling, why you wanted to serve on this committee, and anything else goes. So the floor is yours, please.
Hi, I'm Kelly Jetzer, and I recently, 2 years ago, finally started riding my bike to work at the university. So I do about 14 miles a day commuting. Makes it so much more pleasant. The ride to work it takes me about the same amount of time, and it's so nice not to have to try to find a free parking spot or pay for parking. So I am looking at ways we can expand the ability for other folks to commute on bike safely and year-round here in Fitchburg. So.
Okay. All right. Next, we will go to, I'm assuming that's Ryan over there with the blue shirt on. Hi, welcome. Ryan, is it Husselman? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll give you the floor.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ryan Holzman. I've been a member of Fitchburg's community for about 4 years now, and I'm an avid cyclist. And I love volunteering for different groups and organizations that are close to my heart. One of those is Free Bikes for Kids Madison. I'm a regular volunteer there. I run the Tuesday night shop nights from January until the end of April, fixing up bikes to give back to the community, to get kids and families on bikes and get them moving around. And I was very excited to be appointed to the committee so that I can help kind of expand cycling in the Fitchburg area, access to it, and make sure that communities are healthy as well, because I am also the chair of the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative Advisory Committee. So these committees sort of dovetail in some ways. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, and a big welcome to you. As I said, we also have 2 other members on the committee, and one of them is Andy Potts. Andy, would you take a minute to give your information?
Sure. I'm Andy Potts, lifelong resident of Fitchburg, former alder. I was on the city council for about 10 years. Avid cyclist, like Kelly, I also commute to work. It's also about 14 miles round trip for me, and like her, it takes me about the same amount of time to bike as it does to drive. Been kind of an advocate for cycling in Fitchburg as well as Wisconsin. I'm also on the Governor's Bicycle Council, where I serve as the chair. So we're sort of the statewide advisory board for cycling, and really just want to see more people out biking, commuting recreationally, all of the above. But that's really all I have. And I'll apologize now for my spotty internet right now. I'm actually up getting ready for a meeting in Green Lake County, and the internet's not great up here.
Well, thank you, Andy. I might also add, Andy used to bike race, so if you ride with him, bring your legs. He rides fast. Thank you, Andy. And then our Alder rep on this committee, Joe Maldonado, would you like to take a second and say hello?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Joe Maldonado on the city council. Live in Duns Marsh, Belmar area. Been on council since 2020, and I've been on bike committee the whole time. I used to bike commute, but I'm, got kid pickup stuff, but that might change next year because my daughter's going to start riding the bus, so might be back to my old antics.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. We will be looking to you for some assistance as we move forward with some of our planning into next year. Again, that's the committee. Dawn Krim joined the committee last month. She had been on some biking events around Fitchburg before. I will let her introduce herself at the next meeting. And to introduce myself very quickly, and then my colleague Phil Groupie, who's our staff support. I've lived in Fitchburg 31 years, been biking all those 31 years. I also work a significant amount with the Boys and Girls Club on their Move and Groove ride. And we're doing some other things in the city right now with cycling. But I've been cycling these trails and routes to New Glarus, et cetera, and Paoli for 30 years. So I've biked a lot. I worked at UW Health, which I retired from 4 years ago. So as your chair, I welcome you to the group, the new members. And then I will turn it last but not least to Phil.
Good morning, Phil Groupie. I am the city's sustainability specialist and the staff report to the bicycle committee. Been with the city for 3.5 years. I've lived in Fitchburg for about 2.5 years now. I would say I'm a recreational cyclist, probably not as avid as several members of the committee, but certainly like to get out around and replace the car with the bike as much as is practical, which is a lot less so with an infant now, but still sometimes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Phil, and welcome. Phil is a new father, 6 months old. Is that right? 9. Okay. So congrats and welcome to everybody. We got a lot to do, and I think it's good we get started today because we're going to be busy next couple of months. I'm going to turn it over to item 4B on the agenda, the bicycling events in and around Fitchburg. Phil, you're on.
All right. Excuse me. In the interests of moving things along, because I know Mark wants to spend quite a bit of time talking about the bike ped plan. We'll go through this relatively quickly. A number of events now that we're well into the warmer spring and summer months, number of biking events happening right now or coming up soon in Fitchburg and the surrounding area. So we got Bike Week happening right now. This morning there is a Fitchburg commuter station over at the bike roundabout that Bike Fitchburg and the Chamber are partnering on. Technically the city as well, but I would be the city representative there, and clearly I'm not. A number of other events in Fitchburg throughout the week. I don't remember where they all are, but a couple of commuter stations on the Southwest Commuter Path and Badger State Trail. There is a ride around the lake as well as a Quarry Ridge mountain bike event happening at that Trek Bikes is hosting. The ride is starting at Delta. The mountain bike ride obviously at Quarry Ridge, and then both are gathering back at Delta for a special beer release in partnership with Trek afterwards. So a lot of stuff going on with Madison Bike Week, but especially in Fitchburg, there are a number of good events going on. RCC, the Resource Conservation Commission, has their annual educational event this Thursday evening, and this year they wanted to talk about e-bikes. So they're working with Spoke and Sprocket to host an e-bike educational event at McKee Farms Park Thursday evening. I put 6 to 7:30. I believe it's actually 6:30. I'm going to want to double check that. But 6:30 to 7:30 at the McKee Farms Park Shelter. So if you're interested in a little educational event and an e-bike show and tell, come on down for that. The couple annual events in July coming up, the Festival of Speed, Move and Groove for Boys and Girls Club, and Ride the Drive. I think I mentioned this last meeting in April. Normally that would be run concurrently. I think that would be run more concurrently with Wisconsin Bike Week. This year it is being held late in August, as you can see here, August 27th, when they shut down portion of John Nolan for bike traffic. Yeah, that's everything I've got on here for events coming up. Anything I missed?
Members, anything Phil didn't cover? We've got a Go ahead, Joe.
There were two bike repair workshops. I don't have the exact numbers on the turnout for them, but there were a lot of people that came to get their bikes fixed, and that was the workshops that the Wisconsin Bike Fed and Dream Bikes put together. One was last Wednesday in King James Way Park, and the other one was in front of Luna's Groceries. So just wanted to highlight that those events went successfully.
Thanks for reminding us about that, Joe. I actually drove by the one at Luna's last week. That looked really well attended.
So I think the key is we've got a lot of activities going on, and we all can't be at all of them, but make an attempt if you can to be at the ones you can attend. So as Steve said, or as Phil said, there is Bike Fitchburg and the city are hosting a donuts and coffee or bagels and coffee down at the roundabout this morning on the Cap City, the Badger State and Military Ridge Trails. So they'll be there this morning till I think around 9. So thank you on that. I'm going to move next to projects updating the city, the bike network. Phil, all yours.
All right. Number of projects here that we've talked about before. I think we might have one new one on here. Sain Road continues. Lacey is currently, the intersection of Lacey and Sain, I believe, is currently shut down for reconstruction through June. They're going to be reconstructing the west side of Sain Road, so they did the east portion of Sain early this spring or in the fall. I'm struggling to remember which, but we'll be continuing through the Sain-Lacey intersection, going on to West Sain. You'll note that previously we've talked about the splitting into 2 phases. This map shows 3 phases. Really all that signifies is the red portion just north of East Sherrill Parkway down to Aurora Avenue is phase 1. That's what's taking place this year. Phase 2 next year is the whole of the yellow and blue portions, but yellow is totally locally funded, where blue, which includes the McCoy and Sain intersection, we did get partial federal funding for that, so that's why there's a different color designating that, but 2024 will be the yellow and blue portions of the Sain Road reconstruction project. Bunch of details on that online. You can see public presentations and maps. There is a detour indicated on the city's website. This is more for vehicles. If you're biking, certainly you can take this detour if you'd like. There's also some local roads you can bike through that are a little bit less of a detour if you're coming up from Aurora Sain area. We're getting into the Lacey Road and Seminole Highway reconstruction this year. Construction efforts have begun. We're hoping to have this all completed November of this year. The intersection of Lacey and Seminole, as you can see, closed from June 10 to August 31st, and then West Lacey Road for pretty much the whole of the rest of the calendar year is going to be closed down with all of the promised improvements for our 2 new members. I'm not sure if you're up to speed on this one. But Seminole and Lacey are being reconstructed as a roundabout. There's going to be an improvement to Badger State Trail crossing Lacey there. Mark, I don't know if you remember exactly what treatment they're giving the Badger State crossover, if they were doing a raised crossing.
It's supposed to be a little bit raised with a zigzag. It's going to kind of be a...
Okay.
I'm holding my hands like this, folks. It's supposed to be a zigzag. It's not straight across. And it's still open now. I wrote it yesterday, or 2 days ago. Yeah,
so the goal here, there's not a detour listed for the Badger State Trail with this reconstruction project. The goal is to keep the BST open as much as possible. There are really only going to be a few hours periods where the Badger will be closed down because they're routing it over a couple of different north-south pathways. It just depends on where the active construction is going on at that time. But there's not really a good way to detour traffic, so we're trying to keep the BST open throughout this entire project. West Lacey Road is going to have separated bike lanes with some paint separators from the road. So we'll have bike lanes along the whole of West Lacey Road all the way to Fitchrona, as well as a 10-foot multi-use path on the north side of Lacey Road.
And they're cutting the hill down too, right? They're cutting the hill, I think they're cutting the hill down as you go that way a little bit.
Maybe.
I think they are.
Okay, that one I'm not up to speed on. We talked about this last meeting as well. There's currently a multi-use path along the east side of Rimrock Road over near Terravessa that ends just north of that development. We have a goal of there's also some development happening on the west side of Rimrock, or County Highway MM, just south of the Cap City Trail. You can see there the yellow dashed line. We would like to connect those two paths there on the east and west side of Rimrock Road. So we are proposing an underpass be built. We did receive a Transportation Alternatives Program grant to cover half the cost of that underpass. So we're still a couple years out from that underpass actually being constructed, but this is the long-term goal to get the Cap City Trail connected down to Terravessa and the Lacey Road bike infrastructure. Final project scope is determined for the Madison Metro Sewerage District's force main rework. There's going to be a little bit of reconstruction and detour impacting the Military Ridge Trail, but as far as I understand, and again, all this information is available on the website that's linked here. As far as I understand, there should just be a couple of reroutes, not any shutting down of the Military Ridge Trail during this construction, so that'll be nice.
You know when it's starting?
I don't know if that's determined yet.
It's not on the website, and we've got the Boys and Girls Club ride going through there, so, okay, thank you.
I am assuming as soon as a date is set, they'll post it online, but I haven't heard. And then a little bit more down the road as well, 2025 reconstruction of Fitchrona Road from Tonto Trail up to near the Nesbitt Road roundabout. So they're going to be, again, adding some bike lanes, a 10-foot multi-use path along the east side, and then addressing some flooding issues. So this will be really nice to create a new connection for the biking network in Fitchburg, where currently all we really have is McKee Road going across Verona. So this will give a little bit more connectivity to the southern portion of Fitchburg's urban service area, but a couple years out on that.
Okay. Anything else, Phil?
That's everything I've got here.
Okay. I'm going to move along, and I'm going to take a little bit of a chairman's prerogative real quick before we go into the bike and pedestrian plan. I want to take 5 minutes and talk to you about our recent score that we received from the Bicycle League of America. Last week, you folks should have all seen the announcement from the Bike League of America, and we were recertified at silver, which is the third year we have had this certification. We had a subcommittee that had people from this committee as well as Bike Fitchburg and our city, others, to put an application together, and we thought as they changed the rules on this 87-page document that we had everything covered as we submitted it. We even had during the time, and Andy and Joe and Phil, you were all a part of this, we had a couple subcommittee calls with the Bike League. And we thought we had everything covered, and obviously we did not. Now, so what we're trying to do, Steve and I are very perplexed over this, and I've talked to Phil about it as well, and Chad. We need to figure out what our gap is, because I can honestly tell you from what we've done as a bike committee, before 19 we started working on this, we have made significant efforts, particularly in the areas of diversity, inclusion, and education, which is what they were working on. Also sitting out there is the term they keep using about slowing traffic down. Whether that's the real reason or not, we don't know until we get our scorecard. So as we get our scorecard, we will huddle, and Andy and Joe, since you worked on the group before, and Phil, of course, we may pull you together with some folks from Bike Fitchburg to figure out where we go from here. We've even done a lot since we submitted in January, but you know, I think it's a 3-year effort, and I'm a little disappointed personally. I'm speaking for myself, not the committee. but I think that we've still made a significant number of improvements. So hang tight. I will also tell you, there are no other gold cities in Wisconsin. Madison is silver. I can also say, I'm sorry, Madison is platinum, sorry. I can also tell you that across the country, there were 45 entities that applied for an upgrade or renewal. They did not award any new gold cities. So it's a case of the first time through with their new rules. We'll see what happens, but more to come here, so just sit tight, and we'll let you know. Are there questions about this?
Mark, my understanding in sort of casual conversations with Steve about this is that there is, like, their standards got a little bit higher than they have in previous years. Is that kind of what you're referring to when you say the scores have changed?
Yes, I worked in healthcare 40 years. We'd have standards and then they'd raise the bar. And I think that's what happened here. But I think the bar raising was good. I mean, I think the things that were in there were good and fair. But yeah, Steve and I have had many conversations on this, and we're going to take this slow so we know what's going on. We don't want to do a knee jerk.
So I'll just add in one thing that was added to the to the evaluation criteria this cycle that had not been in the past, and this is happening with a number of different designations and scoring criteria for other areas as well, not just cycling. But the Bike League added in an equity category this year. That's not something they had incorporated in the past. We're glad that they did, but that came rather late in the cycle, and we didn't necessarily have a lot of insight into how they were going to evaluate that. So we have known for the past several years that we wanted to do a better job targeting equity. We feel we made some strides there. Certainly there's a lot of room to go, and we anticipate that's probably going to be a portion of the report card where they indicate we have room for improvement. I think that's going to be the case for a lot of communities. Just seeing for the first time how they're evaluating equity as their kind of considering body.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Equity was certainly in there, and I think if we looked at some of the programs we did, including with Alder Maldonado, as well as some of the Bike Fitchburg education, as well as looking at the own makeup of our own committee, we've made an attempt to work with the equity issue, but obviously we don't know exactly what it is, so we'll try and find out as best we can and just keep rolling forward. I think it's important, if you get a chance, go look at the Bike League's website, and they'll give some of the best practices, because one of the things from 2019 is we were cited for not having enough percent ridership. Phil went out and got us things called Trafix that counts the traffic on our trails. We've been submitting that to this committee regularly. In addition, we even were in a project with the city of Madison on counting bike activity. So that was run by the league. So there's a lot of stuff going on with that. The B cycle was huge. That was in our 19 recommendations. So anyway, more to come on this. Any other comments or questions about it? Okay. Now I'm going to move to the pedestrian plan, bike and pedestrian plan. Phil included for you at the last meeting, and even again in this meeting, the 2017 bike ped plan. And in that, at the very end, well, first of all, Andy and Joe and Don Krim all participated in this project. But at the very end of this document was a series of recommendations, which I'm not the best clerical person. I put these on an Excel spreadsheet, and Phil's sharing them with you right now. But what we have agreed to do as a committee, and what our city leaders have supported us on, and where Alder Maldonado has agreed to do, is to put some money in next year's budget to support a refresh/revision of this plan. Not a rework, but a refresh or revision. So, excuse me, we've done a significant amount of things in here. And I think the key is that are we going to do all the other things that were under recommendations, number one? The second part of this plan is that it also was called Bike Ped Plan, and the directions I've gotten from the city is that our focus is going to be on the bike piece of this only. The thing that I'm kind of confused about in having this is that the accountability of the plan, because we were working the big ticket items in our work, and I think we've gotten those accomplished. But there's a lot of things in there that have budget implications, that have a lot of other impact across our city, and we need to decide, are we going to do them? Are we not going to do them? And then go forward from there. So I would like us to take the rest of the meeting, most of the rest of the meeting today, to go over this. I'd like to hear what, again, Joe and Andy, your thoughts on the process. I think it was very good a couple years ago, but I don't think we want to do that whole thing again. We just need to get this thing upgraded. It was done in 2016, so it's 7 years old. So what I did and what Phil has accomplished is given you the bike component recommendations right out of the back of that plan that he's got on the screen. So I'm going to stop here, and I guess I want to see what the membership thinks about this plan and the approach that I'm suggesting, which is we review these on a regular basis. And as we look at these things, we're either going to say, let's get it done, let's go find money to do it, or let's forget about it, or it's already done. So I'm going to be quiet. What you guys think of
Mark, just a point of clarification, and I don't know, Phil, if you could help answer this. Phil, are you the staff liaison on TTC?
No. That's, why am I blanking on who's covering TTC right now? I think that's usually the transportation engineer.
Okay. Well,
So right now it's...
Mark,
is it?
we're going to take on the biking part of this.
Hold on. We got more than one person talking. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry. There might be a little delay in the Zoom. So, Mark, you had mentioned that we're going to be taking on the bike part of this, which makes sense. I'm wondering if another committee will be looking at the transportation part of this, particularly pedestrian part of it, because I know, particularly like if you look in the King James neighborhood, there's a lot of speeding that happens, and I've had residents that kind of reach out for traffic calming and things like that. So I'm wondering if that part of the plan, whether it be sidewalks, crosswalks, other things for pedestrians, are going to be, kind of looked at by a committee in this refresh.
Phil, you want to...
So I can ask, so Tim Volker is our Public Works Director. He's apparently currently staffing TTC. Ross Kaler is a senior project engineer who, once we have a little bit fuller staffing in Public Works, I believe Ross is going to become our new transportation engineer. As far as I understand, it's Public Works, it's their sphere. That's something that they're going to handle anytime they're looking at reconstruction projects and they're evaluating what needs to be done around the city. I don't know if TTC looks at pedestrian. I would assume they would, but I'd have to talk with Tim and Ross about that, how involved they get in pedestrian infrastructure during those committee meetings.
Okay, and I think we also need to check with Chad, because Chad and Phil both directed me when I started bringing this up a couple months ago. They said, let's you folks focus on bike, and we are the bike committee. We're not the bike and ped committee, Joe. So I think the city and the city leadership need to answer that question. And we can follow up for us. Other comments from the folks, from you, Joe and Andy, who served on the committee, on the process last time?
Yeah, I think the process worked pretty well last time, but it was also very involved, and I agree. I think we could probably do a refresh that's much, probably a lot fewer big public meetings, much more like internet focused, and kind of solicit comments online.
Okay. We also did a chamber survey that we can share with this group, but it's probably getting a little dated. We surveyed all the chamber members about cycling, and we can do that as, I think you're right, Andy. The more we can do online, the better off we're gonna be for this refresh.
And I think I mentioned previously that I did talk with just a friend who's in urban planning and just kind of, we did a quick back of the napkin type of estimate on this. It seemed doable for the budget we're talking about. And even then we were still including probably like 4 or 5 public meetings. So not to say this would be entirely online.
Right. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're just introducing this. I think the one thing that has to go on our first recommendation as a committee is that Phil and Joe ensure that it gets into is it the city budget or the CIP? Which one?
It depends on what we're talking about. Or do you mean the budget to refresh the plan?
Yeah, in 2024.
I think that would be a CIP, Joe. Is that right?
Yeah, it would need to be in the CIP and then in the budget. So both.
Okay. So we're.
Yeah, and I haven't talked to the mayor about like kind of her thoughts on all of this, but I can do that and kind of see if it's something in there, and if it's not, I would be glad to introduce an amendment.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joe. My understanding from Chad is that it goes in the CIP. Chad and Mike Zimmerman is it would go in the CIP. So if you could just double check and kind of be our point guard with Phil on that, I would appreciate it.
No, you are correct. It's CIP then budget.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move along from there. Joe, you participated. Do you have any comments about the process last time?
I mean, I didn't really participate. I was on bike committee for a little while, but then they ended up changing the meeting date. So my time on bike committee was very, very short. So just putting that out there for clarification. I always appreciate the credit y'all give me, but I wasn't on there long enough to be able to kind of make a dent or make an impact.
Okay. All right, well then let me jump in. We got a little time left here. Let me jump into the document. Phil, can you put it back online, please? Bear with us. Okay, so as you look at this document, as I said, this was my work at home, so if I misspelled anything, I will take a wet noodle for that. But at the same point in time, I think it gets all the key things that were in here about bicycling, not pedestrian, that were recommended. And I made a goal, go at some of these, whether it was in process, not started. Truly nothing is really done per se, but we made a lot of good progress. I mean, B-Cycle is a good example. So I guess I'd like us to, over the next couple of months, to the end of the year, review a portion of this plan every meeting and have discussion. I think that makes the most sense unless somebody else has a better idea to do this. We're going to need to get a lot of folks involved beyond just this group, our city leadership, our alders, Bike Fitchburg, our schools, and it becomes a community event, the chamber. But I want to just to start with what was there. For example, if you look at chapter 3.2, a bike route network, the very first one, it talked about work towards completing the network of primary neighborhood routes. And then it gave at the very end, the plan said how many years it should take to get done. I think that the bike plan did do it for most of Fitchburg. They didn't do it for Southdale. They didn't do it for what Phil was talking about going on with Terra Vesta expanding. It's not been done for Fahey Fields. So that is an easy one to get our hands around and say, what do we do about the bike networks out there? All new places to ride in the city, and what are they going to have? So those are the kind of things that I think I'm looking at as we look at this, is we just go through these one by one and identify what we know, who we need, and also say, is the recommendation realistic? There are some things on here that are going to be very tough and very budget conscious to bring about. And I think we have to put them in a priority order as we move forward. But I've pulled this right out of the plan, and it's right in those last 5 pages that Phil sent you as far as recommendations go. Any comments?
I do have a comment about, so for the first one where it says work towards completing the network of primary and neighborhood routes, is that something that ever actually gets completed as we develop, as the city changes? Won't that need to always be an ongoing, I mean, getting satisfactory routes within the existing neighborhoods is something that we should certainly work toward completing, but we should expect this to always be on the docket, right? This is something that I don't think will ever be, we should never think we're done.
No, I agree 100%. And Phil just put something up you can look at, Kelly. I mean, we mentioned Terravesa, we mentioned Southdale, we mentioned Fahey Fields that are all going up. So I would agree, that stays on there. And that's why I put under the implementation status in process. So I think you're 100% correct on that. So some of these will be easier than others. Any more comments about the network? Because I'm going to jump down too.
Yeah, I don't know if this is, can you go back to your original screen, Mark?
Phil's driving that. Oh, this
Okay.
screen here?
Yeah. Okay, I had a comment about school zones, but I'll wait for that.
Okay.
I
Go ahead, Kelly.
I do have one more about the riding on sidewalks. Is there an established policy in the city? Is it currently legal or illegal? Because people hear all the time one way or the other about whether people are allowed to ride on sidewalks at all.
It is currently not allowed. The state gives municipalities the flexibility to create sidewalk riding ordinances. Fitchburg doesn't currently have one. I've been talking with some other staff about that. There are differing thoughts on the wisdom of it, so we'd have to, if that's something we wanted to pursue, we would need to talk about how to do it in a way that is also safe for pedestrians. That's of course a concern. If you put bikes on sidewalks, does that create a hazard for pedestrians? So it would take a lot of thought and planning, but currently it's not legal. So that's the state law is that sidewalk riding is not allowed unless your municipality creates an ordinance otherwise.
All right, do similar communities in the area have such ordinances? Are we an outlier, or is it typical that Dane County cities do not have
I
ordinances?
have only looked at Madison. Madison has a sidewalk riding ordinance that basically says sidewalk riding is allowed. You have to yield to pedestrians. If a building directly abuts the sidewalk, such as you'd get downtown, especially in the Isthmus, then you can't ride on the sidewalk. So essentially the idea being that somebody needs to be able to get out of the way, either the cyclist or the pedestrian, and so having the building right up next to the sidewalk is not a safe situation. But in other cases, sidewalk riding is allowed in Madison. I don't know about any other cities in the area. I haven't looked into it.
I can help with you. Monona does not allow it.
Okay.
You ride that lake loop around Monona, there's a part where you used to get on Monona Drive, and you had to get out in that street, which had no bike lane whatsoever, and had a curb cut that was kind of dangerous to ride in. So you can't ride on Monona. Now, other key with this, if you read because I kind of paraphrase these things, folks. If you go to the plan on staying on sidewalks, it talks about a speed, too. It talks about an age. And if we say, and more importantly, are we going to ask our police officers to enforce this? I mean, that's the other piece. How fast are you going to be riding? That's one of the things going on with e-bikes, as Andy Potts can probably tell us, is how fast do they ride on these trails? And so I think we can check the surrounding areas. I don't think our police enforce it, but I don't think we've ever asked them to enforce it. And personally, I mean, I don't know. You other folks in the committee, any other comments about riding on sidewalks here in the city?
I actually have one. If your route requires you to get from one place to another and there's not a safe way besides the sidewalk, especially for young kids. It seems cruel to not have a way for them to safely get where they need to go. If the sidewalk is the only safe option, it feels wrong not to facilitate their need to get somewhere.
I think we need to talk about it. I think we need to get the police, our police officers involved. We need the right people from the city. We need Joe, because it's gonna have to go before the council. So Phil, I guess let's just kind of stay on 3.2 here. Let's focus on all four of these, and maybe we can get some action moving on discussing them further. So if go ahead, Joe.
Chair, I just want to say I'm very, very, very hesitant about like talking about police involvement or enforcement and people riding on sidewalks, because I feel like that could lead to some really I'll just say that could lead to some equity issues, you know, particularly if it turns into a, you know, issue of racial profiling or I'm very hesitant about going down that road.
I respect that. We can take the word police out of here, but if you read the document that was voted on in 2017, that's how it's worded. So I'm fine with that. Knowing how fast somebody's going on a sidewalk is going to be very difficult to gauge. So we need to look at the recommendation and then what our strategy is going to be. And I think, so Joe, I just personally on my document crossed off the word police. But if we look about enforcing it, we got to figure out how you're going to enforce it. So that's fine. I respect your comment. So again, I guess let's go back to the network recommendation. Kelly made a very good point, is it's an ongoing. I think as a group, we should list the new areas coming online that we can add into that plan. And Phil had a network right there. Phil, if you could check, besides the ones we mentioned, Southdale, Terra Vesa, and Fahey Fields. And you've also got the new Stoner Prairie.
The Stoner Prairie development.
So there's 4 developments that we need to add into our bike network. Any more? And I think we can do this on our own. So that would be one of the recommendations that we could say in the plan, because it was supposed to be in 4 years. But again, this plan was approved in 2017 and we're in 2023. So, Phil, if we could get some work on that and where the committee can help you, the city staff, let us know. This stuff's not urgent, but I think we can tee it up.
And I think it'll be, the question is, does that become part of a plan refresh next year or the following year, or is that something that's part of working on completing the plan before we get to a refresh?
I think it could go either way.
And not to suggest that we wait on addressing those areas. I think that's something that anytime there's an infrastructure project going on in those neighborhoods, Public Works is looking at bike facilities. Right. But in terms of incorporating into the plan, that would just be my question, is whether that's something that would normally be part of a plan refresh process, or if it would just be, if we would kind of retroactively adjust the plan to include those.
I would go ahead and redo those, because those are all, 3 of those 4 are up and running. And I think we can go ahead and get into that. And a plan is a working and breathing document. So as Kelly said, it's always an ongoing process. I don't think we have to do that. I think it's low-hanging fruit. So I would vote that we put it into. Let's go ahead and begin to have something done by towards the end of the year. I would shoot for December for us to be through all of these and have a recommendation that we're either going to, take off. We're going to keep working on them. We're going to say it's got budget implementations and figure it out from there. So, I mean, that would be my proposal. So I think we talked about the first one. Those of you online, any other neighborhoods we don't have mentioned yet? Okay, I'm gonna move to the next one then, which is the treatment of the intersection and trail crossings. Now, it said very briefly, improve the intersections and crossings, identify gaps. Now, we have, as you know, we added a flashing light at Cap City Trail and Seminole Highway. There's a request from citizens to add a light or a flashing light at Cannonball and Seminole, and Chad and Tim and Phil are looking into that. There's been an improved intersection at McCoy and M. There's gonna be an improved intersection at Cap City Trail at Syene where it crosses. So those are just a few examples. Should we go through in our own mind, and maybe this is one you check your citizens, where we've got gaps in our crossings, whether it be signs, whether it be electronic flashing, et cetera. Do you folks, and that was supposed to be in the plan for 1 to 3 years. Do you folks have anything else that you would add to look at this or do it differently?
I would ask that we think about what it means to improve an intersection. Anytime a slip lane is put in that crosses a trail, that's a place where disaster is likely. Even with the no turn on red that is very clearly lit up out at the McCoy area. I went out last early spring and just sat for a while and watched cars go through the intersection. And it is true there were no bikes or pedestrians trying to cross, but when that light was clearly visible, well over half of the vehicles that approached the slip lane would slow down and then go during that no right turn. So I don't think those signs do what they're supposed to do. And especially because since there's not often bike traffic, people who get in the habit of just going when that light is on, eventually they are going to run into somebody who thinks it's safe because it's their turn to bike across.
So where are you
In
talking
fact,
about?
It's double M at
Rimrock.
McCoy, the
Oh,
Rimrock.
The new
on the
area,
Cap City
yes, the
Trail.
new signalization.
Yeah,
Okay,
which
okay.
they refer to as an improvement, but most bikers don't see it as a safety improvement or a convenience improvement for them. My request is that if ever we do a slip lane, to make sure that the cars, a slip lane where there's a trail crossing, we do a raised intersection at that spot so that the person approaching in a car realizes there's an actual reason not to turn right. So a raised crossing to emphasize that there's a trail and there will be people on that trail, and it would slow them down so that if there is a crash, the biker is hurt less. I think improving those kinds of intersections needs to really consider how much more safe we've made it for the vulnerable road users rather than how convenient we make it for car traffic.
Okay.
And that's going to happen again when we get to the Syene and Cap City crossing, which has been a deadly crossing in the past. But now the new proposal, which would officially be referred to as an improvement, has the bike traffic crossing far greater distance and requiring probably 2 light cycles to go across what right now is 2 lanes of traffic.
I don't think so, but, all right, let's talk to Public Works. I think it's the next step we take in this. Because there are the work done on both M and McCoy and M, and the work done on Sain was all done with engineering and city staff and approved by this bike committee. So while there were improvements, you're saying you don't think it was 100% improvements. I think we need to identify where these other areas are and take a look at. I mentioned Seminole Highway, trying to stop people coming across the Cannonball. And the issue with that is there's a stoplight that is about 150 yards from that crossing. So the traffic half the time's already stopped, but they're not from the other way. So I think we've got time we need to identify. But Phil, I think going offline, starting off talking with Tim, do we have a streets person yet?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Ross will become the transit engineer. He's effectively wearing that hat right now. He just doesn't have it full-time. There is a public works intern this summer that Ross is going to have monitoring some of these crossings to get a sense of traffic count and also potential safety concerns. So I can ask him to look at the McCoy intersection as well. See if, I would say at this point, it's probably not realistic to get the bike and pedestrian crossing raised, but even putting a sign up if there's not one already to alert drivers that it's a crossing might be a possibility, but I'll ask him to look at that intersection.
So yeah, let's go back and look at that. The other one I think we can identify is, I don't know how many of you know this, but they slowed the traffic down on Seminole Highway where the Badger State Trail crosses by the old, whatchamacallits, O'Brien Farm, where it crosses there. They slowed it from 50 down to 35. So again, that's a start there, but that's one that we have to get Dane County involved. So some of these get beyond just Fitchburg. Seminole Highway is not, but the other ones are all Dane County that you mentioned. And we need to talk to Dane County and probably the state too, because they control those trails. So Phil, if you could at least check with those folks before the next meeting, we can have a further discussion on that. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to keep moving down this first section. Lighting of trails and on-road fatalities. Now, again, this was why these were lumped together, I do not know. But it talks about we should light all of our trails. Andy and Joe, I don't think we have any lit trails in this city, do we? I'm asking you guys.
Sort of. You go down the Southwest Trail, there's these like solar lights that are in the bottom, but I don't even know if they work anymore, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I know it worked in the beginning. It's like a little, it's between, it's like adjacent to the Allied Drive on the trail there.
Are our tunnels lit? I don't ride at night, so I don't know if they're lit or not, but what this thing, yeah, Phil just called it up. Establish policies for providing lighting on and off-road facilities and in tunnels and other areas along trails as needed. Again, I know the park, I know some of the McKee Farms Park is lit. And there's lights going into the park on the multi-use trail that people do ride on. Andy, do you recall discussing this one? Oh, okay. Oh, he said he had another meeting, didn't he? Okay, all right. I will withdraw that question. So I think our committee needs to talk about where do we feel the need to light these, and particularly as people are using them to commute, it's also becomes a safety issue. I do know that Madison has lit some of their trails. Since I don't ride at night, I don't know if they're all lit, but I think these are things we can get our hands around and go from there. I'll look to other comments.
Well, I'm curious, not having been part of this process, just about the phrasing, establish policies for providing lighting. Does this just mean that there's a departmental policy, a standard protocol? Does it mean that there's actually a municipal policy about lighting trails? So this doesn't necessarily say light all of your facilities, but have a policy for, right. I assume when it's appropriate, which types of trails, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Madison, I know, lights their tunnels. I don't know if any of their other trails are lit at night. Yeah, other than parks, I don't think Fitchburg has any lit trails.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
No, I don't think we do. So I think we can have further discussion along this. I think if we're gonna do it justice, we also need to know what the budget implication is if you light a half mile of trail or a mile of trail, just as an example. But, so as you can see, folks, I mean, just looking at these first four things, there are a number of big ticket items. Some are long-term, some are short-term. And then we got into about 5 pages of this. So I just made a start as we went forward. And one of the things that was in there that's at the very end, it says we're supposed to review this annually as a committee. Now, we've set priorities since Phil and I began working with the group. Those priorities were based some out of here. They were also based on gold and safety. And the other piece I tried to do was make sure we're better linked with Bike Fitchburg. And I think that's occurred. I think we focused on safety as needs have come up. Again, I use the crossing over PD as a good example. And the light on Seminole Highway is another example. We haven't got it all done. And I think we have our work cut out for us, but I do think we're better than we were in 2017. And I think we're better than we were in 2019 and 2020 as Phil came. So I'm going to stop now. It's approaching 8:30. Yes, Phil?
Yeah, I'll just add one comment. As long as we're on section 3.2 here, the electric assist bicycles citywide policy, I just want to, I guess this could be part of the staff update, but I'm looking into an ordinance to address e-bikes. This was something that was brought up because of users at the mountain bike, the single track trails out at Quarry Ridge. Apparently some folks have been coming with things that are less like motorized bicycles and more like, I think, mopeds. They're not really pedal bikes. They're just motor powered. So we're looking at what signs we can put up to make clear who the intended users are of those trails and make sure that any sign that we erect is in line with actual city policy. The introduction of B-Cycle and the e-bikes there was already motivation enough to develop a citywide policy about e-bikes on trails, but this adds a little bit more urgency to the issue. So that's something that I'm starting to look into is creating an ordinance that really lays out more clearly what classes of e-bikes. So a couple years ago there was a change to statewide ordinance that provided 3 classifications of e-bikes, so that will provide us a little bit easier time addressing what types of e-bikes are acceptable on different types of facilities around the city.
Okay, I think that is, I think given where the state started with that and given the thing that's going to be going on this Wednesday, they're going to be talking about different kinds of e-bikes. I personally was involved in a discussion with the Fitchburg Senior Center about e-bikes with Julian from Wheel and Sprocket. So again, e-bikes are the wave of the future. And I think that as this population ages, people will be getting off what's been called acoustic bikes and moving to electronic assist. So more to come on that. So I want to be able to get through the rest of the agenda on time. What I would like
Mark.
to do, oh, go ahead, Joe, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to one of the items you had mentioned. I just want to make a note that since there are 4 or 5 schools, I would say 5 schools that are either in Fitchburg or across the street from it, that we, in the refresh of the plan, set up some sort of infrastructure for communication with principals or school staff around safety, just because I know in that Terra Vista neighborhood, I know there have been some concerns about like walking and biking. And I think maybe a refresh plan would include some sort of regular standardized communication with, with those schools about safety.
I think it's a great idea, and I can tell you, I personally talked with the representatives of the Verona schools, the Oregon schools, the Madison schools as a part of the submission of the document with the bike league because I had to call and get the information that they had. So you are correct. That's got to be part of the thing. And as you know, Joe, we've got Steve and Mike Grady who are doing education sessions with up in some of our underserved areas of the city. So I will put that on the list to move forward. There's one more thing I want to ask, and I'm going to let the agenda back to Phil. So if each of you would take a look at this plan in detail and shoot me and Phil your comments around section 3.2 and section 5.2, which does get Joe into education. If you can submit feedback and your thoughts along those before our next meeting, yeah, those first two there, and just use, if you'd use that format, we can revise it to use it. I'm going to use this as a working document so we can track all this. I've been taking notes today, and so's Phil. So we've got to start on the network. We've had a little bit of discussion on sidewalks. We haven't really talked about lighting, and we had a little bit of discussion on treatment of rails. So if you can look at that and also look at the education and encouragement programs, I think that'll help it get us going. And then by the end of the year, we can at least know what we're going to do. So if I'm giving everybody a homework assignment. So I will ask Phil, put that in bold in the minutes, please. For those of us that have already left, like Andy, I'll talk to Andy Potts. I'll see him tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So
just to confirm, I heard right, you said 3.2 and 5.2?
The first two on this list, which I pulled right from the plan, right from the back page of the plan you gave us.
Oh, God, okay, so 3.2
Yeah,
and 3.3.
3.3, I'm sorry, 3.2 and 3.3. Again, I typed this myself, so it should be 3.3.
3.2 and 4.2.
There you go.
Right, the first two.
Yeah, the first two. My mistake. Like I said, I was typing this myself. So, at any rate, look at the first two sections. Shoot me your feedback by the document on the title on the left, and then we'll go from there. And then the other thing I'd like to ask Phil, at least to check up on with Tim and Ross about the biking on the sidewalks, because it is it's a two-edged sword. And with that, I'm going to ask that you go back to the agenda. Joe, you're on for a council update.
No updates on my end.
Okay.
Just scratch that. I know the CIP is sort of being worked on as we speak by staff and the mayor, so just kind of look out for that soon.
Okay, thank you very much. Phil, your staff report to the bike committee. Item 5B, guys.
Not a lot to report, just beyond what we've been talking about in here. I did neglect to include, I'll go ahead and do a quick screen share here now. Last time I was able to get out and capture data from those Trafex counters on our trails was in mid-March. So I've got data through the winter. I don't yet have riding data from these trails from mid-March through the end of May. But at least I've been continuing to get these counts. It's turning into a heftier and heftier table here as I add more years and months. I think the big the big number worth noting is the ADT here, so the average daily count. And it's obviously going to be a little bit smaller here for 2023 because all we have is a couple months out of the winter, where you see that the South Fish Hatcheries, that's down near where South Fish Hatchery meets Irish Lane. We've got a counter there. We had 19 is our daily average through mid-March. Last year we were at 26. So that's probably one I'm going to be looking at moving at some point this year. That's just not showing a lot of traffic. I think there are probably other areas that might be more useful for capturing how much ridership we're getting around the city. But where through 2022, so we've got Cannonball, Military Ridge, and Badger. These are all right around the bike roundabout. So the Cap City Trail overpass then over Fish Hatchery, so right by the Odessus on the trail there. Those 4 are all showing over 200 users per day passing these counters last year. Even in the winter months, we're getting 80 to 115 at those spots. So pretty solid usage of these trails during the colder months as well. Certainly once we get warmer month totals in here, that'll give us a little bit more interesting data. Haven't updated these with, or all of them at least, with the 2023 data, but at least looking at kind of a few different ways of visualizing this. So kind of looking at January through December, what's our average in terms of weekday and weekend traffic. I think it's kind of interesting that weekend traffic, probably not a surprise, in the warmer months, weekend traffic, the orange bars here, tends to really eclipse the weekdays. During the summer, when a lot more people are, kind of the casual recreational riders and runners are getting out on the trails. You get into the winter, it's more of just sort of the serious gearheads, I guess. So they're kind of riding throughout the week, and you don't see as much of a gap from weekdays and weekends. So it's kind of an interesting data visualization there.
Phil, if I could interrupt 1 second here, I think it's important we get the May and June, the new data, particularly as if and when we look at our bike league comments, because one of their comments, we didn't have enough percent ridership. So if we could get an update and show that we're counting this and it's gone up, I think that will help our cause. Or demonstrate our cause, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have one question about where the counters are placed.
Yes.
And you mentioned maybe not using the one at Fish Hatch. You still have that counter, and you could move it somewhere?
Yes.
I think there's a whole host. I mean, where I ride the Cannonball Trail on a part that I've never been counted. And I know I see other commuters that I think take a similar route. Right near Leopold School, where it's still Fitchburg, rather on Cannonball. If you counted there, I'd be interested. I don't know if you want either the floating one or to move the fish hatchery one. I think you might see some pretty good numbers
That would be one interest. Yeah.
on Cannonball just as you cross post.
Yep. So right up here. So yeah, what we currently have, and this is, I guess, worth pulling this map up for Kelly and for Ryan at least, and Dawn, if you watch the video later. 3 of our counters are here near the bike roundabout. There's a 4th one on the Cap City Trail near the roundabout that the county manages. I have not been able to get data from them in a while. I just haven't heard back when I've asked them. I hope they still have somebody going out there to capture it. But then we also have one here on the Cap City Trail near the Fish Hatchery Bridge. We've got one down in McKee Farms Park, this one in South Fish Hatch, and then up on the Cap City Trail over by Cyene Road. So yeah, that is definitely one place that would be an interesting one to capture ridership. Part of the reason that we didn't initially was just because we already have the Cannonball Trail over here by the bike roundabout, but it could be interesting just to get those 2 spots and see how the numbers compare. If you have a lot of people entering and exiting the Cannonball Trail in between those, that might show a discrepancy and maybe would give us a sense of maybe more ridership kind of in that neighborhood as opposed to just the through riders that are doing those big 10, 20, 40-mile trips.
Well, I think that's why you wanted to purchase those, you could move them around as the need dictates. And I just think we just share that with the people looking at the data. Let's give it a look and.
Yep, and it just takes, they're just mounted on metal posts driven to the ground, so I just got to get in touch with the Parks Department and see when they've got time to move it and give them an exact location. So that certainly would be a good candidate. I guess there's a question of whether the other 6 are still in areas that we're interested. So 5, this one out here in the Cap City Trail, the interest here was we're getting people coming into and going out of the city. That is really just giving us recreational riders. Now, if we're talking about, I guess thinking about what the purpose of this data is, if the goal is to capture Fitchburg ridership to submit to the bike league to demonstrate ridership in Fitchburg, then this spot's not as useful. There would probably be some utility in terms of thinking about the McCoy-Cyene intersection redevelopment, giving those numbers to Public Works Department to know how many people are using this on a regular basis. that has more value. But if we're looking at Fitchburg ridership, probably moving this would be the next priority.
I think we're looking at both. I think we're looking at, if you look at who's riding to Epic, there's a significant number of folks that head down the Military Ridge Trail into Verona. And having ridden that myself again last weekend, even on a Sunday, it was so packed. It was the most crowded I've ever seen it. So I think you got to look at it from both ways. What do we need locally? Because if we're going to ask our alders and the council to support us on things, we're going to need data. Whether it's safety or lighting or whatever, but I think at the same point in time, the bike league wants to know how many people commute to work, and I think that's a piece that says, I think it's both. So.
Yeah, and certainly since part of our pitch as a bike-friendly community is the regional and state trails that pass through. So, yeah, that's important as well. Another option is looking into the cost of just adding new traffic counters. Now, every time we add more, that's more counters that we got to get around to collect data from, which takes time. But I don't know. Maybe at some point I start seeing if somebody in the bike committee wants to get out and capture this data occasionally. It's nice to take a 2-hour break from the desk and bike around to collect this data, but I don't always have the time.
Well, Tony Hartman and I'll be happy to volunteer. I'll volunteer for him.
That's another possibility. Is I'll check and see if there's the possibility of adding budget to purchase a few more counters rather than just moving things around. But see what's the best option.
So as soon as you get that done, would you just send a note out to our group when you get the new updates on there?
Yep.
That chart. Thank you. And you are right. It is getting kind of big. So how you shrink it is, you can make that call. So okay, you're still up.
I think that's it.
Okay. All right, we got a few more minutes left. I'm going to give the Bike Fitchburg update because nobody from Bike Fitchburg is on the board, is attendance here. The Bike Fitchburg members that are in town are over helping at the Bike Week event at the Dolly Roundabout this morning with coffee and bagels, I think, and orange juice. They knew we had this meeting, and the only other thing that they've got going on, they're looking for some new officers and members on their board. They're down a couple, and they're looking to try and refill the board. And then they have their Take Me to the Border ride in the end of in September, and Phil reported on that earlier. So I don't have anything else to report from them because they didn't give me a formal report. I'm kind of just going by what I know there. Is there anything else? I'm going to move into announcements. Is there anything else from the group that you'd like to share that we have not covered today, or we need to put on our agenda? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to move to adjournment, but before we entertain that motion, I'd like to ask between Kelly and Ryan, any feedback? We want this to be an active committee, and we want everybody's feedback. I think that's going to be very important as we look at a new group of people working on this. So any comments, Ryan? I'll pick on you. I see your name up here on the screen.
Hi, I don't really have much feedback. It was a good meeting, lots of good discussion. I'm excited to dig more into that bike plan and pick out some information. I know one of the things that I was a little bit disappointed in with the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative Advisory Committee was that we were unable to recommend funding using the grants that we had to recommend to the council. We were unable to recommend the Bike Fitchburg application for wayfinding signs for the different bike paths, mostly because we just had so many applications and we only had limited funds. So it was a year where we had more requests than we had funds to give out. But I was, hoping that we would have been able to recommend that. But I think that's something that we should look at as a bike committee as to maybe trying to build into this bike plan as well. I think there was a section in there at some point that mentioned marking, but having good signage about where you're able to go using the bike paths is going to be critical to increasing rider confidence and rider willingness to actually use those paths to get around.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think if you look at the Cap City Trail coming into Fitchburg, when you cross McCoy, it'll tell you it's 0.2 miles to Glacier Trail or 0.4 miles to the bridge. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, general, directions as to like how far is it to the next connector or
Got
to
it.
certain things, but also like where is the library from here? How do you get to, is there any local? Are there restrooms nearby? Is there, a source of water? Are there gas stations? And I guess further, if you're in a car, right, and you're riding on the highway or something, there might be exit signs that tell you where there's, food available and those sorts of things, to be able to involve different businesses in the city that might provide, food or entertainment or things like that, an opportunity to put up some signage as well, maybe sponsored, ad revenue helping to pay for some of those signs. To say, hey, if you ride down this path another 1.5 miles, you'll get to Hop House Brewery and you'll be able to stop and get some refreshing drinks and maybe a little bit of food. It is extremely helpful in making people, who are using the paths more confident and able to plan, their routes and events without having to worry about if there's going to be resources or businesses that they want to hit up.
Good idea. We can put it on our work list with the plan and just be certain we don't get into, we got to watch how we advertise things, but library certainly is a generic one, City Hall, those kind of things. So some more to come. Good feedback and welcome to the committee. Kelly, do you have any other feedback? Nope. Okay, well, welcome to you too. Then I'm going to entertain a motion for adjournment. And Phil, when is the next meeting? It's in August.
Next meeting is Tuesday, August 1st at 7:30. So that one, there will be construction going on in the council chambers, so we will be in the Genie Ceiling Room.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure we get that communication out. Jeannie Seelig Room is right as you come in the door. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so. All right, thank you, folks. We'll let you know what we hear about the Gold Committee, the Gold Journey. Also, I would encourage everybody to get out and participate in these events that Phil showed you, starting a lot of stuff this week, and you even got time to ride over right now and get a free bagel from Bike Fitchburg. So thanks again, and I appreciate the new membership. We'll get this plan updated on the road, and we will work to continue to make this a safer biking city for everybody. So I'm going to take a motion for adjournment, please.
I move we adjourn.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Can I second?
Second.
All right, Ryan seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're done, guys. Thank you.